Today's lesson is lesson 2.7, which is about percent of change. So, for the first problem, you're going to have two options. You either have a change that is an increase in the number or a change that is a decrease in the number. And then we'll talk about how to find the percent of change also. So, the first thing I need to look at is the original number, which is 66. 66 is my starting number, and then my new number is 30. So you can see that 66 to 30 means that there was a decrease in the numbers. So this would be a percent of decrease. Now, to find the percent of change, there's a certain ratio that you need to set up to find it, which is starting with the original number. So the original number should be first, and that should be written as your denominator. The numerator for finding percent of change is always subtracting the two numbers. And you're never going to have a negative number here, so you always take whatever the higher number is subtracted by the lower number. So in this case, we have 66 minus 30. So that would be our setup for our ratio. Now we need to simplify, and it's asking for percent, so we would need to change our answer to a percent. To do that, we would need to first do 66 minus 30. 66 minus 30 gives us 36. And then I have 36 over 66. Now, it really is not that important since we are changing this to a percent for us to simplify, but if it helps you to get a smaller number to work with, that's fine also. So if you wanted to simplify here, you could divide by 6 for both of them, and you could get 6 over 11. So let's say we did that first. You don't have to simplify, and if you didn't simplify, you wouldn't get the answer incorrect, but I'm going to show you, you could also get 6 over 11. Okay, so if you did 6 over 11 and you're trying to make this into a percent, when you have a fraction and you want it to be a percent, you need to change it by dividing 6 divided by 11. And that's going to give you a decimal. So 6 divided by 11 gives us 0.54 repeating. Okay, so 0.54 repeating, I'm going to say this is about 0.55. And to make this into a percent, remember you need to move the decimal place 2 spots to the right. So you have 55% as your answer, and that's a 55% decrease. Okay, so I'd write 55%. Now, this is the same type of directions for this problem. We're supposed to find out whether this is a percent of increase or a percent of decrease. So I look at my original number, and then I see if my new number is either higher or lower. So in this case, the new number is higher, so this would be a percent of increase. Okay. Now I'm going to set up my ratio, which is the change in the numbers, or the numbers subtracted from each other. Remember, it doesn't ever need to be a negative number, so you just take whatever the higher number is, no matter whether it's the original or the new, and put that subtracted by the smaller number, so 40 minus 24. But the denominator is always the original number. So it's going to be 24. So I'm going to subtract 40 minus 24, which gives me 16, and I have 16 over 24. Now let's say the last one we simplified first to get our decimal. This time I'm not going to simplify it first. To get our decimal, I'm just going to take 16 divided by 24, which gives me 0.6 repeating. So I could say this is about 0.67. And if I have 0.67 as my decimal, I need to change my decimal to a percent by moving the decimal point over 2 spots to the right. And this would be then a 67% increase. And that would be your answer. Now, we have a word problem here where we are supposed to find the original cost per year. So I'm going to read it first. It says, a recent percent of increase in tuition at Northwestern University, let's say that's probably all universities, in Evanston, Illinois, was 5.4%. If the new cost is $33,408 per year, find the original cost per year. So we need to use the percent of change ratio to be able to solve for this answer. So if we were to use that, remember it says the higher number minus the lower number. Well, we don't really know which one is higher and which one is lower. Okay, so I'm going to just put, actually, that's wrong. We do know which one would be higher and which one is lower. The new cost is higher because it's the increase. So we're going to put the new cost minus the original cost. But we don't know the original cost, so we need to write that as minus x. Now remember also for the percent of change ratio, it needs to go over the original amount, which we also don't know, so that's also going to be x. Now, it's equal to 5.4%, so we know that this ratio is going to have to give us 5.4%. Now, I'm going to go back and change this back to a decimal because when you're working with a percent, you usually don't want to have it as written as a percent while you're working with it. You usually want to have it written as a decimal because a percent is going to change your answer. So we're going to write this back as a decimal. So if I move the decimal place back to the left 2 spots, because remember you move it to the right 2 spots to change the decimal to a percent, we're going to change the percent back to a decimal. So we move it 2 spots to the left, and that gives me 0.054. So that is what my ratio is equal to, 0.054. Now, this is basically just a complicated equation from here. Okay, we're trying to get the x by itself, okay, because it's an equation. So we need to solve for x. To get the x by itself, remember with any equation, we always start by canceling out whatever's in the denominator if it's set up as a fraction. So I need to cancel out the x, and I need to move it actually to the other side so that I have only one x on each side. So I have 33,408 minus x, and I'm going to put that over x, and then I multiply by x on both sides to cancel out the x on the right. Now I'm going to have to erase the problem here to give myself some more room. So I'm going to rewrite up here. We have 0.054 equals 33,408 minus x over x. And I just multiplied by x on both sides because I need to cancel out my denominator because my goal is to get just one x on one side by itself. So now I have 0.054 times x, which I can write as 0.054x, equals 33,408 minus x, and I've gotten rid of the x as my denominator. So now I need to continue to get the x's by themselves. So I have an x on one side and an x on another. I need to combine the x's. Since I want to try and keep it positive, I'm going to bring this x over to be with the 0.054x. So I'm adding 0.054x plus 1x. So I get 1.054x equals 33,408. And then to get the x by itself, which we've done before, we divide on both sides, which is the opposite operation. So we get x equals whatever 33,408 is divided by 1.054. So this gives me about 31,696. So 31,696. Now to check myself, I really don't even need to plug it back in. Hopefully if I did the correct calculations, you can notice that since this was supposed to be the original cost and it increased slightly, okay, then you can see the original cost is lower. It's 31,696, and that's lower than 33,408. So my answer is a reasonable answer. Now we're going to do another word problem, and this time, and you can notice here that with these word problems we're going to be using the ratio for percent of change. So this one, it says a new DVD costs $24.99. If the sales tax is 6.85%, what is the total cost? Quite frankly, I would say using the percent of change ratio here is actually a little harder than the method that I'm going to teach you now. If you are trying to get a new cost or a total cost and you have sales tax or you have markups, things that are going to add to your cost, you always want to do the cost times either the tax percentage or the discount percentage or the markup percentage. Obviously we need to write it as a decimal first, like we talked about with the last problem. So I'm going to write 6.85% as a decimal by moving the decimal point to the left 2 times. So it's going to be times 0.0685. And I get $24.99 times 0.0685. What that tells me is that tells me the dollar amount of the sales tax. So in this case, it's about 1.71. That's not my answer. My answer needs to be the total cost. But my cost originally and then my tax now is $1.71, so I would just need to add them up to give me my total cost, which is $26.70. So yes, there's a setup to use with percent of change that you could do for this problem, but quite frankly, I think it's easier to just take the price, multiply it by the tax or the markup or whatever the percent is as a decimal, and then if it's the sales tax, you would add it to the total cost. If it's a discount, however, you would subtract it from the total cost because it's a discount. If it's a markup, that's a markup, so you would add it. So you're either adding or subtracting. In this case, we added. The next example is actually going to be subtracting. Okay? So you would take the original price, which is $14.89, in this case, for the picture frame. It's on sale for 40% off, so I'm going to multiply by the decimal version of 40%, which just means 0.40, because I moved over the decimal place 2 spots. So I get 0.40 times $14.89. This gives me my discounted price. Now it's about 5.96. Now with this one, I'm going to subtract it from the original price because I have a sale price, which is usually lower than the original price, hopefully. So you have 9 minus 6 is 3, 18 minus 9 is 9, 3, or 13 minus 5 is 8. So my new price, but discounted, is now $8.93. And that concludes Lesson 2-7.